So the very first cut that we're going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a short woman's square layer, also known as a pixie. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to start with our mannequin head. It's going to be wet. We're going to start through the top bit of the section, and we are going to section out a vertical section through the center top. All right, this is going to be the very first thing that we're going to do. Now we want to make sure that all of our guide sections aren't too thick, but we also want to make sure that our guide sections are substantial enough that we'll be able to see them through our cutting sections as we progress through the haircut. I will start by lifting up a little bit of hair here so that I can begin the cut. I only want to keep in my fingers as much as I can control. We will be cutting a certain length. I find that anything longer than 3.5 inches when cutting a lady's classic square layer or short lady's square layer, actually the corners of the square layer become too low and the shape becomes very droopy. So we will be operating with a length of about 2.5 inches tonight. And we will start by cutting a straight line that will be horizontal and parallel to the floor. If you notice, I try and organize as much hair as I can, and I keep the hair only as much as I control. I don't try and take too much hair because then my technique winds up suffering and I wind up actually biting off more than I can chew, as they say. And then actually the accuracy winds up getting lost and the clarity of the shape and the strength of the shape winds up getting lost as well. One thing that I think is super important as I cut this technique or any other, I will always cut until I run out of hair. I find that if I do that, what winds up happening is the shape evolves in front of me and then my vision becomes a lot clearer as I move forward and complete the shape. This is my first section. I will reverse engineer that section to make sure that it is precise. Once that is precise, I know that I can actually be a lot freer with my movements because I know that that this setup and this foundation for it is already set in, and that is ultimately where all of this haircut will begin and will be the guide that will serve me through the rest of the haircut. After that first section is done, I will take my next section parallel to that section. This will be section 2, paying attention to make sure it's not too thick. One rule that I always think is super important is I always want to be able to see my guide section through the section that I'm cutting. I don't want to be flipping the hair so I can see my guide. I want to make sure that I can see it through it very clearly. Then I know that my technique will be accurate. Also worth noting, I will be over-directing to the previous. This is the guide section that I just cut. This is section 2 that I will be cutting. This section will be section 2 will be over-directed to number 1, and what that means specifically is it will be over-directed to the parting in between 2 and 1. That is what over-directing to the previous means. And I continue working my technique, making sure that I am over-directing to the previous and making sure that my guide is as clear as a ruler behind the hair. If you find that your guide is at all diffused at this stage while you are cutting, the issue will be that you are either over-directing it too far away from you or you are actually pulling it too close to you. That guide should be solid and there should be no diffusion behind it. That is how you can make sure that your technique and your guide is in the correct place as you're working this technique and as you're creating this shape. As I continue to cut, something that I would like to share is what the purpose of a square is. As we can all see, or as we may all know, everyone's head shape is actually asymmetric. Putting a symmetric box on top of an asymmetric round-shaped template, being the head, actually ensures that as I'm cutting, I'm actually creating something that is true balance and not just working off of creating an expanded shape of an asymmetric template, which is actually the way the head is. I'm over directing 3 to number 2 now, being very mindful of my technique and making sure that I am really controlling that hair and over directing it to the correct location to make sure that I am creating my square shape as accurately and as strongly as possible. This shape grows out very well and will actually, even though it may become too long, it will grow out gracefully when it's cut with strong technique and with precision. If you notice as well, I am always sectioning out the prior sections that I have worked with, and I keep only isolating my guide and my cutting section. I will continue to cut this side into this section here. When we're cutting squares, we want to make sure that all hair now, it doesn't keep moving over here, but it goes straight up to the ceiling. And then there I make sure that I am cutting a square, expanded shape through the top. If you notice also, my body mechanics are very intentional. My shoulders are square, my elbow is square, my hand is square, so that I make sure that everything of my body mechanics and of my physiology is supporting the technique that I'm trying to execute. Hair cutting and accuracy and technique does not begin and end with the hands. It's a whole body endeavor. And when the whole body is actually being held in the way that supports the technique that we are cutting, then your technique and your shape will come out correctly. I have finished the left side of the head. Now I will be moving to the right side of the head to execute the exact same technique so that I have a balanced top moving forward. Isolating my guide section again to my cutting section so that I'm not just combing up a bunch of hair, always picking up only what I can control, over directing it to the previous. As I move to the back, you can see that I'm never holding it out here. I'm always straight square. I'm always operating within a box so that I make sure that my corners are in the right place to support the shape. The corners are super important. What they do is they provide areas of weight around the head that fill in what may be lacking. Perhaps somebody doesn't have, somebody has actually pronounced parietal bones. So they may look a little bit, we'll say, cone-headed, perhaps, when the hair gets shorter. When we have these corners, the corners will actually fill in what is lacking, so that as the haircut grows out, that type of a head shape will not be revealed, and one of balance will be revealed, and they will feel as though a haircut isn't necessary because it is actually honoring the shape as it grows out and the precision behind it. Anything that is cut with precision will always grow out more gracefully than anything that is cut sloppily. And this is a prime example of it. A strong shape, a strong technique will always hold up and stand the test of time as your clients are in between appointments. I'm very concerned with what my client's hair looks like in between appointments. I find that I never want my clients to have a third of their haircut looking sloppy as they're waiting for their next appointment. I want as they're walking into the salon for their next appointment, I want them to be getting compliments on their hair on their way in, not only on their way out. After I finish that top bit in my vertical sections, now I will go about the act of cross-checking my work in the opposing way in which it was cut. So I took vertical sections initially to cut it. Now I will take horizontal sections to cross-check my work and make sure that I've cut a square plane through the top, which I am very happy that I was able to do. In this in this portion of the haircut, when we're cross-checking our work, if you notice, I am only taking tiny, tiny things. I'm only correcting minuscule things of what may correct or strengthen the shape. Anything that is longer than something that is a very small amount, I will actually identify in the cross-check, and then I will wind up addressing it in the exact same way that it was cut. Oh, and there's a piece missing right there. I don't want to address it in the cross-check because in that moment, I may cut a step or a hole. So I will bring it back into a vertical section and I will address it there so that everything will stay on point as far as my technique is concerned. I will continue to cross-check the right side of the hair. Very happy to see that it is indeed square. And with that knowledge, I can move on to the back. When cutting the back, we're going to start addressing this corner right here. This corner will be what is actually built up when I address the back panel with the top panel. This corner right here becomes super relevant to anyone who does not have a flattering head shape or has not so much of an occipital bone. This corner will provide the weight that will actually create a flattering head shape and a flattering silhouette, in case that is what's lacking in the natural head shape. I do always like to stay organized in my work, so I will section off some of this front so that I'm not addressing that in this moment while I'm cutting the back. I want to make sure that that is isolated so that I can stay focused on the matter at hand and not be distracted by any other hairs coming from any other direction. Something else that's important in this moment, I will make sure I tilt the head down slightly. It will help me execute my technique more gracefully, and this way I can be sure to actually stick to precision technique and not be forced to move my hand angle due to the head position. It's very important as we cut hair to remember that we don't always have to do all of the maneuvering around our clients. It's really important for us to acknowledge the fact that we have to have them move a little bit so that we can actually execute the proper technique. So, if you notice, the grain of the hair is slightly pointing up, not horizontal, because I am honoring that the head is pointed down a little bit. Now, I'm cutting straight down in this vertical section, and I'm cutting a layer technique, not a graduated technique. It is not getting leaner at the nape. I am providing a lot of softness within this technique, and it will actually create a shape and an aesthetic that won't be so tight to the head, but will provide a little bit of softness and looseness, which will actually ensure that the femininity of the haircut is not lost, even though it is a shorter type of length. Now, this is my first section. I will take my second section, and similarly to the top, the second section goes to section 2, and what that means is the parting in between section 2 and 1. That is what we are over directing it to, so that we're making sure we're creating a nice square panel through the front or through the back. Again, looking for those solid guides so that we can ensure that my cutting section isn't too big, creating inaccuracy as I'm delivering the technique. I only want to cut what I can see. I don't want to ever be guessing at any lengths or any guides. I want them to be clear as day so that I can stay on point with delivering accurate technique and an amazing haircut to every single client that comes into the salon. This is section 3. I will section off section 1 so that, again, I am isolating exactly what I'm cutting. Organized space, organized mind. The haircut that is cut in a sloppy fashion will also be a sloppy haircut as far as technique is concerned, and that sloppy technique will grow out very awkwardly and will not be serving you, your business, and it will definitely not be serving your client. All the way to the bottom. Even though I do plan on detailing out all of the perimeters, I don't want to take for granted that I'll get to that later. I want to make sure that it's all cut into the solid shape so that it creates strength. Then I can use those extra lengths to create softness. I definitely believe that in cutting hair, you want to make sure that you have more than you need. You can always detail it out. We can cut it, we can never grow it. And we never want to be stuck in a situation where we wished we had something to detail out. We want to make sure that we have those extra bits so that we can personalize and make the work our own. I believe somebody once said, and I have actually adopted this saying for myself because it was so pointed and struck me as so true. In the act of haircutting or the art of haircutting, it is definitely better to have and not need than to need and not have. There. If you notice, even the way I make sure I comb both sides so that I'm ensuring I'm getting the guide and the cutting section with equal tension in my hands. Very, very important. When we do this, we can ensure that all hairs are in the game so that our guide is accurate for what we're doing and so that we're not creating a bunch of steps. This is very, very important. Let's see, will anything else reach all the way back here? Okay, perhaps a little bit will, but as you notice, I'm still staying true to square. It's always square right there. Everything lands within this zone here. I just want to make sure that I'm getting rid of this extraneous hair so that I can see the shape forming before my very eyes. There. Now back and top are complete. And what we should have here is our very first corner will be revealed. Now we will move on to the sides. And what these side panels address is actually the corners that will operate through the parietals, as well as the corners that will operate behind the ears to create some extra strength and a little bit of weight to fill out perhaps what can be a very narrow neck or can be a very narrow nape. Making sure the head is now upright while we're moving into the sides. We can actually even give it a little tilt to the side. It can help us accurately get to the bottom of that side section and definitely these sections that are behind the ear when we actually move into no guide. And I will explain all that in one moment. The very first section we take on the sides is actually right above the ear. If you notice, the first section that I took through the top was through the center top. The first section I took in the back was through the center back, because these are both the widest areas of the head. I want to make sure that I set up my lengths and my guides at the widest areas so that I'm not surprised when I get to those areas and then actually I may have wound up cutting it too short. On the sides, the widest area is the area right above the ear, and that is the wide of the side of the head. So that will be my very first section. I will comb it out, honoring again the fact that the head is slightly dipped to the side, and this is where I will create my corners through the sides. I will move from that section forward first, and then I will reestablish that section and then move back. So my very next section, section 2, will be moving forward towards the face, but yet will always be directed back to section 1, meaning the parting in between section 1 and section 2. Again, looking for that strong guide. As long as that guide is strong, I know that I've over-directed it to the appropriate place. If you notice as well, I'm cutting palm to palm. I will rarely correct people for a visual aesthetic or creative aesthetic. I will correct people as I teach in their body mechanics. It's very important that we keep these wrists straight as we're continuing with our careers that will go on for years and decades of success and artistry. We want to make sure that our bodies don't give out on us. So we want to make sure that we're not doing this with our wrists. That is carpal tunnel syndrome in a couple of sections. This keeps the wrist straight, so this is the way that we want to cut this. I understand that at times these type of body mechanics can be difficult to actually adopt for ourselves and become comfortable as we work with it. That said, as we continue to work with these type of body mechanics, they actually do become easier, and with enough practice, there you will find that they will be second nature, and it will almost seem silly to cut it in any other type of way. But just like anything, it takes practice, it takes discipline, and it takes sticking with it, because actually this is an investment in your own body and in making sure that your body is going to last in your career for years and years and will never give out on you. There. Now we finished the front bit from above the ear, from right on top of the ear, moving towards the face is done. Now I will reestablish that initial section that is at the wide of the side. Now I will take that and I will move to the back, creating this corner through here that lies right behind the ear. I'll create another section, section 2. We'll go to section 1. And that meaning the parting between 2 and 1. This being 1. 2 going back, let's say. So this next section is a little bit tricky, because this next section, being section 3, actually winds up going below where there will be no guide. So what becomes important in this moment is that I keep on following the trajectory that I'm cutting while I have a guide to when I have no guide. You will see right now. So I'll take section 2, again, isolating it and being very specific so that I make sure I'm not sloppy. And I will be over-directing section 3 to section 2, meaning the parting in between the two sections. This is an area that actually tends to create a lot of extra weight potentially when the head isn't tilted to the side, because we will have a tendency to then wing our hands out like this, creating extra length through here. This is another feature of why it should be tilted slightly to the side, so that we can stay very on point with our technique as we continue to move to that area behind the ear where we start getting new areas of hair through the perimeter. And we can still stay very true and very accurate to our technique nonetheless. I will take this must be section 4, and I will now over-direct that to section 3, getting number 2 out of the way. There. And as you can see, in operating in a way where I'm always cutting until I run out of hair, I can see the shape developing in front of me, and as I keep working, the work gets less. Because now, as you notice, I have a lot less hair that's coming from the back into this side panel as I move, which is great. Because at the beginning of a haircut, when you have all of your energy, that's great to be cutting out all these extra lengths. But as we near the end, we want to be sure that we're starting to work smarter and not harder, so that we can actually feel the progress and see the progress in the actual shape and the technique and the look that we're creating. I was just checking to make sure that I ran out of hair, And indeed I did. Already I'm pretty happy with this look. It's looking like it's got a nice balance. I can already see some of the bits that I'd like to detail out and soften. And I think that we're off to a really, really good point in this haircut. Now, as I finished off these sides, I will now also cross-check these. And I will operate them in horizontals because I cut them initially vertically. And I am so happy because I'm being videoed that my technique is on point and I have created a true square with very solid lines and techniques. As you see in my cross check, I am not removing much hair at all, just a little bit to solidify my technique, strengthen up my shape, strengthen up my lines, and make sure that every hair is exactly where it needs to be so that the grow out can be so graceful. And while something may feel too long, it will not feel as though they were caught in a desert island somewhere. And in a moment, as soon as I'm done cross-checking this panel, I will make sure that I will show you where the next corners will be revealed. And those corners, one will be through the parietal corner, and one will be right behind the ear. Corner. When we're done with the basic technique, we can cut into and soften the corner, but remember, these areas of weight are creating a nice strong shape that'll grow out accurately. So perhaps rounding the corner isn't the answer, just softening it so that we don't have big areas of weight, but we do have a nice strong shape to work from. Now, after I've done that, I will move to the left side of the head, getting it a little bit damp so that I can actually control the hair that I'm working with. And that first section, similarly to the right side of the head, will be right above the ear, which is again the wide of the head, so that I will not be surprised once I get there by accident cutting it too short. I will take that section, making it nice and precise and isolated. We will tilt the head a little bit to the side. Now here's what I do. There's two ways to address this because obviously we need balance from left to right side. The way I do it is I'll look for where's my corner going to be. Remember, we did say that the head is asymmetric. So perhaps the correct answer isn't necessarily to say 2 inches, 2.5 inches on one side and 2.5 inches on the other side. The correct answer is to look for where the corners fall so that we make sure those corners are creating that symmetric balance that we're looking to create. Now I've taken section 2. Section 2 will be over-directed to section 1. And remember that means the parting of section 1. And here's section 3. Goes to section 2. Strong guys behind me so that I can see everything that I'm doing. Giving it a little look. Nice and balance is happening. That is good news. Now I will tilt the head to the side one more time. I will take my initial section that is at the wide of the head right above the ear, and section 2 going back will be over directed to that initial section, section 1, at the wide of the head. Same danger zone in this next section 3. I take out section 2, separate it from section 1, create my next cutting section, and in this moment I want to make sure that that head is tilted to the side so that I can honor my technique as I move to that area right behind the ear where I will be flying without a net. And I have to make sure that I continue the exact same trajectory of line that I'm on right now as I move into the area of the hair that will have no guide. But I'm set up because I have my motion already happening from what I had done above the section where I have, or the area where I have no guide. Now, section out number 3, and now we go to 4, and we make sure that we bring that in just in case there's any hairs that need to be brought into the party. There's a couple. There. And now I will tilt the head upright, and I will go about cross-checking this work, making sure that my technique is on point. If you notice when I cross-check, I comb up, anchor so that I'm at another elevation, and then out, so that I'm controlling the hair that I'm cutting, and then I make sure I'm checking it at multiple elevations, there, to make sure that I'm accurate on all levels of the head, not just one. So we want to make sure we lift up, then out. In this moment, 2 new corners will be revealed. This one, that will be taking place through the parietals, there. And this one, that will be happening right behind the ear, here. Now we have a lot of shagginess. We have a good strong shape, but we don't really have a look. Now this is where the artistry comes into play. And this is where we get to start having some fun. I am not going to be cutting anything super strong. I'm not going to be cutting anything edgy and really baby bangs. I'm just going to create something nice and soft that is effortless to be styled and will work no matter what this client is actually working towards and what kind of look they'd like to have happen. I'll comb this all down, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to create little areas of separation in the hair. Hair does grow in groups, and when I detail it out in groups, it actually will become a lot easier for our clients to style because they don't need to actually pick up little pieces. The pieces are already cut in, and I can get all of that softness, a little bit of interest, some different lengths happening, and creating some artistry here so that actually it has a nice soft look where everything is intentioned. And I will slide cut those out. And I'll say I'm seeing it's naturally growing out of the mannequin head, swinging a little bit to the right. So I will honor that. I strongly believe in honoring where the hair wants to grow. I don't really like to force hair to go anywhere. I do like to work with it in its natural state, and I do like to honor that where it is, because that way it works always for our clients. And see, I'll slide cut little details out. There. As I was saying, it's okay to have a lot extra. What isn't okay is to not have it so that I can't detail it. I won't be going for everything to be slide cut and ending on the same line. I'm looking for varied length so that I can create softness. There, I'll do a little shorter piece right there. Open that up over the eye. Maybe we'll take this one and maybe bring this a little bit longer. And then here, maybe a little shorter. Then we'll go a little longer. Making sure I'm working visually at this point. If this was a real human being, I'd be looking for eyes. I'd be looking for eyebrows. What are the features that I really want to bring out in this client and show off? That's really the biggest mission here, is for me to actually pick facial features that I'm showing off on the client and then I'm revealing, so that actually the haircut is working for a frame to the face. It isn't a piece of art unto itself. I always want to make sure that whatever I'm cutting is actually working for the client, and the client actually isn't being worn by the haircut, if that makes sense. Now I'll shift over to the side a little bit, and I'll start detailing out a little bit what's going on here. I'll comb it forward. How do I want to see this softness? One of the things that I can say as a broad generalization, I am not one for rules, and I find that all rules always find a very perfect time when they can be broken. Generally speaking, however, in our Western society, what makes a short haircut a woman's haircut as opposed to it being a man's haircut as a generalization is a certain element of softness to the perimeter. A man's haircut, while being short, will tend to be very strong, hard lines. Women's hair, we'd like to keep those perimeters a little bit softer, or at least have an element of softness available. We can have some hard lines. I'm not anti-hard lines, and I've cut many. I've shaved sides. But I think it's worth noting that that is for the right client. Remember, this truly is a one-size-fits-one business and not a one-size-fits-all business. And when it all comes down to it, we're always operating what's best for the client. And sometimes that does look like something that's a little bit more modern or avant-garde, where we have a hard line someplace. But I might suggest, when creating that, also being sure to create a little bit of softness somewhere on the haircut so that we never lose the femininity of the look, if that's what our client would like. As you notice, I took a little bit above the ear. I don't necessarily want to carve it out around the ear. I just want to reveal it a little bit. Perhaps the client will wear some beautiful earrings that we want to show off, and we don't want to get lost in all the haircut. Okay? I'm not saying you can't ever carve out around the ears. I'm saying in this instance, I'm looking for a softer type of aesthetic. Now I will move over to the right side. I've addressed everything from the ear forward. Now I will tilt the head down so that I can detail out the areas of the head that are at the nape and right behind the ear. I do love a little bit of softness behind the ear. It's a weakness of mine. So I will comb it forward, and what I will do is I will pick areas and I will slide cut them so that we can get a little bit of softness going on from back to front, unifying a little bit of this look. But again, I'm doing this mindfully. I'm not just picking up crazy pieces. I'm making sure that I'm working with pieces that actually want to live together, and I'm being very, very conscientious of the directionality in which I'm cutting them. If you notice, I'm cutting all of these from the center moving out because I want it to fan out that way. This hair right here, I'm actually going to take out and cut on top. I don't want it to swing to the left or to the right. I want it to swing more static. See? And then that way it won't push left or right. I will do that with the next section as well, so that we have stuff that is really softening out that nape. There. And then as I move to the right side of the back, I will tilt a little bit to the left so that I can really get at this hair and really see what it is that I'm detailing out, and slide cutting and keeping a lot of control over my visual, over my creation, over my artistry, and over my technique, so that I am sure that everything that I'm creating is actually for the client, the individual client. I am not doing anything that is a stock haircut. I always cut to the individual, and I will always cut to the features that actually show her off the most and make her feel the most beautiful. You know what I'm thinking? I'm looking at this. I'm going to add a little bit of edge. I'm going to make sure that the center bit is even a little bit shorter, actually. I believe, and I think, that the nape area and the neck on a woman is one of the most beautiful areas of a woman, and I want to make sure that I reveal that on this haircut. So I will actually take a little bit more out of that nape. There. Now, let me do a little styling, and we will reveal the end product in but a second. Now what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to take a smidge more product in my hands. If you notice, I did apply a lot of it when the hair was wet. I find that when I put a foundation of product in the hair wet, I use less of it when it's dry, and then I never run the risk of actually putting on or utilizing too much product. So now at the end, I'll bring it home with a little bit more definition with a smidge more product in my hands and on my fingertips so that I can pull out these pieces that I carved out around the face. And I can add more definition to the interior if I so choose. And guess what? I do so choose that. And I'll also pull out these areas right at the nape. So that we can show that softness as well. I always love definition in softness. It's not a necessary thing. I know many women who wear this style with a lot less product, if any product at all, and it does still look good. But, it is worth noting when utilizing product, it does really bring it home, and it does allow for a little other level or area of creation in that moment. And this is my women's short square layer.